Hi everybody, welcome to the first ever episode for Moonlight Transmissions. So I just wanted to give a little introduction to the channel. So basically this is a channel dedicated mostly to music. I'm mostly going to be covering metal stuff and the dungeon synth and ambient scenes. So for this first video I'm doing the first of a new series which I'm calling New Wave of Dark Dungeon Music. So this is basically all sorts of new projects, mostly from the 2020s and a little bit from the 2010s, of newcomers in the dungeon scene and the general ambient scene. So this is supposed to be featuring fairly underground artists for the most part, so I'm not going to be covering any modern classics. There's no criteria for who gets featured in this, but it's just stuff that I think needs a little bit more attention and some more promotion. So the first project I'm covering today is Hecate from Illinois, and their first album, Dance Beneath the Poison Moon, which came out in March of this year. So I think this is one of the more unique projects from the modern scene. It's got a very interesting blend of atmospheres, so you have a more peaceful, relaxing tone mixed in with some darker stuff, which comes with the writing style and a little bit of darker background vocals on a few of the songs. One of the really interesting things about Hecate is that the two sort of darker and lighter tones on this album occasionally mix on the same song, and it's a little bit hard to explain, but that sort of blend of atmospheres in a single song is pretty rare in a lot of music. You'll find plenty of albums that switch between tones between songs, but rarely all within one song. So it's something that I think you have to just listen to it to really get, but it's a very interesting thing that I think they pull off very well. So for each of these projects I'm going to be selecting a few songs to get you started that are some of my favourites from each of these albums. So from this album, Dance Beneath the Poison Moon, I'm going with Mother of Witches as probably my favourite track. It's got a bit of a cinematic quality and a sort of vast soundscape to it. It reminds me a little bit of the Skyrim soundtrack, just in the way that it's produced and the overall atmosphere it makes. So this album ends with the song, As I Dance, Stars Fall Upon Me. It's more of a darker, brooding one, even though there's a lot of darker songs throughout the album. I think this sort of is the darkest atmosphere you get, and it just works really well and closes out the album very nicely. I also want to mention the intro track. It's got a bit of a creepy, mysterious vibe, and I really enjoy it as a way to start off the album. So to wrap up Hecate's section, this is, I think, one of the most unique and interesting projects in the modern scene. They do have quite a few other releases since this first album, including 2 EPs, which are both really good. Especially, I really like the second EP, I've listened to it quite a lot, and I'll put a link to that and this album in the description. Hecate does have physical releases through the record label they're signed to, and I don't know the name of the record label, but I'll put all that stuff, all the Bandcamp links in the description as well. So the second project I'm covering in this video is the Ashen Codex from Long Island, New York. So this project started in March of this year as well, with their first release, Echoes of Eminence. So this album has its own concept story to it, and I'm not going to explain it at all here because I think you should explore the story as you listen to the album, but it's all in the Bandcamp lyrics, if I remember correctly. There are actually no lyrics on this album, but the lyric section has the story for each of these songs. So I've listened to this quite a bit for a few months now, and in my mind this album can really be split into 2 different parts. So the first half has a bit more of a relaxing, meditative ambient tone to it, and then pretty much halfway through you switch over to a much more symphonic and bigger sound. The Ashen Codex does describe itself as orchestral dungeon synth, and that really is what the second half of this album sounds like. It's got much more symphonics, it's very big and very catchy, especially for dungeon synth. It's quite a different songwriting style, and it works really well. So my favourite track from Echoes of Eminence is The Brightest Light in the Dark Forest. This, I think, really captures both elements of this album very well and sort of showcases them in one song. It's got a bit more of a relaxing tone to it with a bit more prominent melodies and I think a little bit of symphonics, not as much as when you get to the later tracks on the album, but it all works really well to showcase the sound that this album has. So a few other things to say about the Yashin Codex is that they do have a bunch of new releases out since this album came out, and they also do play live, and I think they're playing at the Texas Dungeon Siege pretty soon. So I've seen a few of the live clips, and they all look really good, so if you do get to see them, you should definitely go and do it. So the Ashen Codex also has physical releases out. You can get a cassette of this debut, and I'm not sure if their newer releases are on cassette yet, but I'll put all the Bandcamp links and the record label they're on in the description, so you can go and find that stuff. So the third project I'm covering in this video is Frostkada from Norway. And this one's a bit of a more special one since we do have a video introduction from Frostkada, from Andre himself.
I started Frostkada in late February, early April 2025. It's a dungeon fantasy synth project. I live in rural Norway, so perfect scenery to create this type of music. The whole project revolves around the Sleepless Galaxy, my fantasy sci-fi universe, and telling its story. Future Medieval Times was my first full-length album. It is a broad window into the full timeline of the Sleepless Galaxy story. So from 2017 all the way to the year 1500. 1500, sorry, 15,000. It explores the dark planetary megalopolis of Novo Olisipul, the capital of the Fifth Empire, and it introduces its Mission Emperor, an artificial intelligence that rules over a majority of the galaxy in the year 2500, as well as the Empire's revered heroine, Amalia. We also look into the capital of the opposing faction, Nova Lemuria, the center of Cosmo-Soviet space. After that, we are taken on a journey deep into an ancient future, into the year 15,000, in the planet Solamia, in its kingdom, Jirveg, where we have a tour of its exotic capital, Vrangstad. On this planet, uh, the society has started again from scratch. No one really knows about the technological marvels of the past, of the whole explored galaxy, of the planets that were settled, and so on. And the main focus of the powers that be is the struggle for feudal power. And in the very end of the album, the last track, we are taken back to the beginning, on Earth, in Norway, in Oslo, where it all starts. Where a bike courier working finds a black book which keeps changing, and that sets off a chain of events that has dire consequences for the whole galaxy. And it brings about the rule of the Hidden King, an entity from another dimension. Of course, my inspiration for this whole story is very differentiated. It comes from a lot of different sources. So let's say Lovecraft, Tolkien, Frank Herbert, Star Wars, Warhammer, The Elder Scrolls, and early 20th century Portuguese literature. This fictional universe is actually supposed to be 3 books, which I've been writing for 10 plus years, but I've never gotten around to finishing a single one. I have, however, written synopsis and timelines and so on, and I feel that Frostskade is the best outlet to tell this story right now. I'd still like to finish the books, but yes, this is the easiest way for me to let the listener know, to express this story, to make this universe come to life, and, well, not let it just exist within my own head. It's also relevant to say that I have a new release out, Rumors of Terra the Forbidden Planet. This delves into a more specific story. The Earth has become inaccessible in the year 2600, and the Emperor tries to cover it up. The Terra Seekers search for the truth, and rumors spread through the galaxy. Feel free to check out my music on Bandcamp and Spotify. Thanks a lot. Have a nice one.
So this album came out in May of this year, and this one's also got a full concept story behind it, which is continued through all of Frostcutter's releases. It's a sort of spacey, epic story. There's a lot of lore in the Bandcamp stuff and with the physical releases of their albums. So the sort of atmosphere and the tones you get on this album is a bit of a different thing. You sort of get a mix of a more medieval tone, sort of a traditional dungeon synth thing, with a bit of a more spacey atmosphere that reminds me, at least in the soundscape it produces, of Tangerine Dream records and stuff like that. The writing style is more dungeon synth though. You get a lot of strong melodies throughout this album and a little bit of percussion as well. There's a lot of variety in the atmospheres of this album, and I think it makes it all the more interesting and a bit more of a dynamic sound throughout the album. So the song I'm choosing for my favorite is Final Approach to Novo Lemuria. So what I wrote about this one is that I think this really captures the sort of sounds going on in this album, in that you get a more traditional dungeon synth style, but with a sort of spacey, otherworldly atmosphere, which is also all tied up with the story behind this album, and it just works really well all together. So Frostcutter has a few other releases that have come out since this one, and there is one album before this actually, which is also worth checking out. I'll put all the links to Bandcamp in the description, and you can find physical releases from their Bandcamp page as well. So the final project I'm going to cover for this one is a little bit different from the ones I've talked about so far. So this is Patagon from Argentina with the EP Snowfall over Patagonia. So I say this one is a bit different just because the project actually started in 2016, although I think their first release on Bandcamp at least is from 2022. So this project has quite a lot of stuff out on Bandcamp and on YouTube. There's a bunch of EPs, albums, and a few really cool compilations which mix songs from throughout their career. So Patagon has a bit more of a winter synth sort of vibe to it, especially with this album Snowfall over Patagonia. I think it really sort of captures a cool blend between the different styles of winter synth you have in the modern scene. So this album, I wanted to say, reminds me a lot of Paysage de Ver's ambient stuff, particularly the Einsamkeit album. I think it has that sort of background wintry atmosphere going on behind all this music, and it sort of all coalesces to create this very enveloping winter atmosphere. So my favorite tracks on this album, it was hard to do. There's not that many tracks on this album, and I think they all really stand on their own as individual songs, but my favorites I have chosen are No Cabin and White Trees. I think these just really work well as individual songs if you want to just go and check out a few songs from each of these artists. So those are the ones I'd recommend, but I would listen to this as an album, even though all the songs really stand on their own. So I'm not sure if Patagon does have any physical releases, but there's a very large back catalogue to go to, which I think it's well worth exploring. Everything I've listened to has been really good, and it's all very strong, atmospheric winter synth for the modern scene. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that. Please go and check out all these artists. They're really all worth listening to, even if you just want to check out a few tracks from each that I mentioned throughout the video. Like I said, everything's going to be in the description, all the Bandcamp and YouTube pages, and a few record label links as well, so you can find the physical releases for this stuff. I'll also put my Instagram in the description. Do all the updates for this channel there, and I've also got all my own musical releases being promoted on my Instagram as well, if you're interested in checking that out. So that's everything I want to say. Thank you to all of the artists for letting me cover your projects. It was a lot of fun to really go more in depth about these albums and write down my thoughts about it. So I really hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching.